some of the strange responses that the EC gave, and what actually is the legitimate answer to those questions?
Do we have a problem with the voters list? My answer is yes. Is SIR the solution? No. SIR actually adds to the problem.
You did get 2 or 3 people who have been presented dead by the EC who are very much not dead because they were next to you.
Election Commission lawyers stood up in the Supreme Court. Sir, ye drama hai. This drama must be stopped. This is not a theatre. This is not television, etc. But the simple fact is the presence of 2 real persons had greater weight than 10,000 papers.
Hello and welcome to the Indian Express on another episode with Yogendra Yadav ji, who writes his weekly column called Deshkaal. This week too, to no surprise of the viewers, the column is again on the Bihar SIR, which is a controversy that has gotten quite heated up over the weekend with the Election Commission press conference, which is the topic on which Yogendra ji wrote his latest column on Monday. Yogendra ji, first of all, thank you so much, as always, for joining us. Your recent column is titled Special Intensive Exclusion, and you have zeroed in on the Election Commission's press conference, and you have taken some of the things they have said and countered them. But before we get to that, just a general question. Now it seems that the Election Commission is on the offensive. Initially, it seemed that it was on, some sort of defensive. It was waiting it out, weathering the storm. But now it has come out guns blazing on its own and accused Rahul Gandhi of a bunch of things and asked him to apologize, etc. Where is this push coming from, do you think, this sudden renewed push? Or is this the impact of all the pressure that it is on?
When we are dealing with a constitutional institution, we should not have to draw inferences like this, whether they're defensive, whether they're aggressive. That's not their job. This is what happens in political battles. When you're dealing as a constitutional institution, your job is just to keep your head down, follow the law, follow the rules, let people say whatever they want to on the street, but you do your own job. Unfortunately, that's not what the Election Commission has been doing. So what came out now was, of course, a very open hostility. Election Commission using a language which is a language of political battles. Now, here is a situation. There are serious questions being asked. Election Commissions was facing allegations. What should you do as a constitutional institution? You should actually set up a process in motion which would, to any fair person, make it absolutely clear that you have nothing to hide, that you are working only for the larger interest of the best voters list and the cleanest election, and that those questions that have been asked have been answered in a way that would satisfy any reasonable person. Instead of that, what does the Election Commission do? Ask questions of those who are asking questions. Make statements which only suit a street politician. Hum chattan ki tarah khade hain. This is not a filmy dialogue. What are you doing? And come up with evasive and rather silly responses, if I may say so. Someone says, give me CCTV footage because I want to check whether after 6 o'clock there were long queues or not, which is what you claimed. And the answer is, Hamari behan betiyon ki photo dikhai jani chahiye. What kind of world do they live in? What kind of a logic is this? And then there were at least 10 sharp questions that were asked. I must compliment the Election Commission of India that they held the press conference, that they allowed all journalists to come, and that questions, at least to my mind, did not show any bias of certain questions being suppressed or so on and so forth. Yes, questions were asked, but they were not answered. Some questions were asked repeatedly, just not answered. So at the end of it, instead of clearing the doubts, the Election Commission finds itself in a deeper controversy than before and is clearly seen as a partisan player. So it got worse, actually.
Right, sir. So on that note, as you mentioned, some good questions were asked, and the responses given were a bit silly. And even your piece has focused on that. You focused on 3 or 4 points, which you think the election commission just gave strange answers, and then you presented what actually should have been said. Could you yourself give some examples of some of the strange responses that the EC gave, and why what actually is the legitimate answer to those questions?
I'll focus just on one because that's a central question. The simple question that has been asked again and again by defenders of the SI, which very often turn out to be people from BJP or their supporters. They are saying, all right, Rahul Gandhi says voter list is faulty. All right, in which case we should support SI. Whenever I go to some debate, someone asks me, Mr. Yadav, don't you want electoral rolls to be cleaned? What do you have to hide? Why are you not in favor of election rolls being cleaned up? That is the question that I address in today's article. Is it? Do we have a problem with the voters list? My answer is yes. Is SIR the solution? No. SIR actually adds to the problem. And the strange thing has happened in our public culture that we allow absolutely absurd logical, fallacies to prevail and to float. And one of which I've referred to, drawing upon Yes Minister. So there's an episode in Yes Minister where they say, the nation needs something needs to be done. Then if there's here is something, and then the step 3 is let's do it. And no one bothers to ask a simple question. Is the something that is needed the same something that you are proposing? This I see all the time in Indian public life and discourse. Voters list, something needs to be done about voters list. Here is SIR. Let's support SIR. The simple question is SIR a response to the problem? Now, my argument is very simple. And unfortunately, even after 2 months of constantly writing, and you're right, I mean, I've been a bit obsessed with it. Because to my mind, what is happening in Bihar is not a revision of voters list in one state. What is happening is a tectonic shift in the architecture of universal adult franchise. And that's the point I make in today's article once again, that yes, there are problems with voters list. Yes, the routine measures are not enough. The routine updating doesn't work very well. Even the annual summary revision hasn't quite worked because large number of deletions that should take place don't happen. A lot of additions that must happen are just overlooked. So there is an accumulated burden of omissions and commissions. And yes, if someone says we should have an intensive revision where someone goes house to house to do a physical verification and check, it's a good idea. Of course, it's a good idea. The trouble is that this is not what SIR is. And that no one understands. Very few people bother to understand that. What SIR has done is that it has done something unprecedented, mounted on the idea of house-to-house visit. Now, this house-to-house enumeration is very different from anything that has ever happened in the history of this country. Because now you are being told two new things have been introduced. So this medicine has 2 poisonous potions or steroids or whatever you call it. First is, for the first time, you are being told, here is a form, fill it up. If you don't fill it, well, you are automatically out of the voters list. This has never happened. Unfortunately, the Chief Election Commission, maybe he doesn't know. He said in 2003, we gave the forms and so on and so forth. This is a complete lie. Nothing of that kind happened. There are records of the Election Commission to show that this did not happen. So, and why is it that important? It's important because the onus of being on the voters list is being shifted onto the voter. The moment we do so, and why is this such a major decision? Because all over the world, there are 2 kinds of system. There is a state-initiated registration, which gets you near complete registration. 100, 95, 98. We were 99 last year. And then there is individual initiated registration, like in the US, which gets you 70, 75. In the US last time it was 74. So that's one very major shift, unprecedented and illegal to my mind. The second major shift is, for the first time, everyone is being told, I don't know whether you're an Indian citizen or not, unless you give me certificates to prove you are. Election Commission has never done it. Once tried it in the 1980s. The Supreme Court came down on the Election Commission like a ton of bricks. And then this was the famous Lal Babu Hussain case. And ever since Election Commission said, sorry, we have nothing to do with it. Determining citizenship is none of our business. Election Commission has issued detailed instructions to say, stay away from this. And now, for the first time, Election Commission, without any change of rules, without any change of laws, without the Supreme Court changing its mind, Election Commission changes its mind and says everyone has to produce documents. These are the critical things. This is what makes special intensive revision so special, so dangerous, so unconstitutional. And that is why this is not a solution to the problem. This actually is the problem.
I think you touched upon the Supreme Court, so that reminded me. I think a few days ago, and you've mentioned this in your piece, that between June 25 and July 25, the EC reported 65 lakh plus deletions to exemplify your point about unjustified omissions, unexplained omissions. So the court has now nudged the EC to present that list and also, I think, give justification for why you did that. What do you think? How do you think the court is going to respond to that? I mean, now it has to, the EC will respond to that. The EC has to listen to the court, right? So what do you think we are going to find when it presents those 65 lakh names?
They have already presented that.
Oh, they have presented
The
it.
commissioner announced in the press conference that this was being uploaded, and within a few minutes, it was indeed uploaded. So basically, for the first time now, we actually know who these 65 lakh people were, whose names were omitted. And against each name, we have a category: dead, permanently away, etc. So everything came, we got to know the day before yesterday. So now people are going to the field for the first time. All those data will now be taken to the field, and they will check whether the dead people were indeed dead or not. In the Supreme Court, we could produce only three persons, and there were 5 or 7 waiting outside, simply because that information was denied to us till that point. And somehow some BLOs had given us this information at great risk in some cases to themselves. And from that, we had gleaned some 50 cases, and we said, this looks like a fraud. But now is the time for real checking. So it has begun, and I'm sure in a couple of days' time, we would get to hear interesting stories.
So I heard about this somewhere, and perhaps if you would want to focus a bit more on that, because you haven't mentioned it in your piece. I think you did get 2 or 3 people who have been presented dead by the EC who are very much not dead because they were next to you. You accompanied you took them with you to the court. What was the reaction of the people who saw this? I mean, what did they say to you? What was going on there?
I can tell you reaction of the Election Commission. Election Commission lawyers stood up in the Supreme Court. Sir, ye drama hai. This drama must be stopped. This is not a theater. This is not television, etc. But the simple fact is the presence of 2 real persons had greater weight than 10,000 papers. And the point we really wanted to make was that although we have been denied information about who had not made it to the draft list because the Election Commission assumes that they are dead, but from the very little information that we have been able to glean, look at the fact that this is unreal. We also did it because, if you would recall, in the previous hearing, Justice Suryakant had said, if there are 15 people who they declare as dead and who are not, please bring them to us. Maybe he didn't mean to say bring them inside the court. But I think it had a salutary effect, the fact that we are speaking something real. And then there was a legal point, which many people miss out. You see, Election Commission has a very detailed protocol of how and when someone can be declared dead. You ask for a death certificate. If you don't get a death certificate, which you normally don't, then you go to the family and neighbors and you get 4 people to certify that this was indeed the case. So there's a very detailed protocol. In this instance, Election Commission has set all that protocol aside. And what we were protesting against is not one or two errors. I mean, anyone can make a few errors. What we were saying that, look, these are 65 lakh cases. You have thrown them out of the draft list, not only from the final list. They did not make it to the draft list. The consequence of that is that they cannot even now say, look, I'm not dead. Election Commission would say to them, all right, if you think you should be on the voters list, please go and register as a new voter. Why should they do so? You have made a mistake, please correct it. But Election Commission extinguished their legal rights. That is what we wanted to show. And the point I really made in the court was, here is this lady. And I said, what recourse does she have now under the law? She is alive. She has been declared dead. And the Supreme Court now tells us that, like any 18-year-old, come and register as a new voter. Is there no place that she can go and say, look, I'm not dead? That was the whole point of this. Not to point one or two errors which can happen.
Wow, that is probably the most astounding part of all this Bihar SIR episode that I have heard. I mean, we all knew that mistakes like these would be made, but I think to get somebody like that, it really does have a different impact. But in that case, sir, then final question. So now going forward, now in this renewed political context, like the press conference politicized the whole thing by a much higher degree. It was already political. It was like it was BJP and EC somehow on one side and the opposition campaigning against it. So it had become a Bihar poll issue. But now this press conference has turned it around completely. So where do we go from here when it comes to Bihar SIR and BJP versus Congress? Where do you think that is headed? Will this be even more politicized? Will this become the national political issue of the next few years?
It has already become a national political issue. I don't know how long this will go on. Now, you see, there is BJP versus opposition battle, which is a political battle. Sometimes it can get nasty. Sometimes one party succeeds. Sometimes someone else succeeds. But we are looking at something very different. Opposition versus the Election Commission should not play out in the same manner as opposition versus the ruling party. Remember, something very sacrosanct is at stake here. India has been different from many other countries, most of its own neighbors, by the virtue of this one critical difference. When the ruling party loses elections, they step aside and say, thank you very much. There is a peaceful transition of power. And opposition enters every election with a fair chance. If people want it, we will win. You would recall what happened in Bangladesh and Pakistan. Not to pass a judgment on these countries, but they happen to be our neighbors. And if you look at institutional decay, these are examples. In Bangladesh, opposition complained and said EC was not playing fair. EC didn't care. Then things reached a point where opposition said, we'll not participate in these elections if this is how you want to run it. And then came the concept of a neutral president who would take over. The court will take over the country for a few months and run it. Later on, even that system collapsed. Now, I'm not saying we've reached there, but I'm saying that is the direction in which we are taking a few steps. And it's a very dangerous thing. The Election Commission could have stopped it. Election Commission could have said, all right, these are the allegations given by the opposition leader of opposition in the parliament. And even if he was not so, even if it was a journalist from Indian Express, all right, I'll say, here are some allegations. My first duty is to look into those allegations and not come up with pretexts about why not to examine it. Absolutely silly pretexts. How can we issue notice to 1 lakh people without any evidence? Sir, no one asked you to do that. First of all, you just look into your own records about these 1 lakh people and see, number one, whether these were wrong entries or not. If these were wrong entries, who was responsible for that? Is a third party responsible for that? Are your own officials responsible for that? Or is the person, individual, willfully trying to defraud you? Only in the third case were you expected, after the inquiry, to issue them notices. Why have you not done the first thing that you were meant to do? So unfortunately, Election Commission, this press conference could have been a moment of confidence building, not vis-a-vis the opposition, vis-a-vis the people of India. You should be so transparent that no one can doubt your motives. Please remember, opposition leaders attacking Election Commission of India is not a new thing. In 2002, Mr. Narendra Modi went around in dozens of meetings. And you remember his dialogue used to be James, Michael, Lingdo, to remind everyone that he's a Christian. I mean, it was that low stuff. What did the Election Commission do? Did they hold a press conference and accuse Mr. Modi? Did they order him to file some affidavit? Did they say we will do contempt of institution, contempt of the constitution? No. They just put their head down, went about doing their job as if they had not heard any of those things. This is how constitutional institutions work. And that is why that Lingdo is still one of the most respected election commissioners of India. Because he went about his job. This was the moment when Election Commission could have done this. The three gentlemen who sit there, two of them were sitting like a statue. The third one was speaking. And this was a moment you could have built a trust with the people of India. And the trust, incidentally, is going very rapidly down. You would have seen the piece in the Hindu 3 days ago where the CSDS has come up with figures of Election Commission trust. I have never seen such low figures in the last 30 years. So instead of building the trust, if you start accusing, if you start dodging, if you start stalling, and if you do this filmy dialogue baji, naturally, the trust deficit would deepen further. So unfortunately, the Election Commission has worsened the situation. It is still not unretrievable. It is a retrievable situation. And all of us, including opposition leaders, must work very hard to make it retrievable. But no one can help the Election Commission if they don't want to help themselves. And that's a sad message that we are left with today. We do have another piece by Vandita Mishra today, a very perceptive piece on how institutions ought to behave and the way in which the EC is doing it right now. So it's not merely one individual or Rahul Gandhi versus this or etc. We really are at a moment where this is exactly the paths countries take when electoral process collapses in those countries. We are at one of those moments. We need extreme caution. We need to be very careful and very fair.
Well, on that extremely cautionary note, this is where we end today, folks. Once again, Yogendra ji, thank you so much for all your time and your detailed insight into this very conspicuous phase that we are in vis-a-vis the elections and our fundamental right to vote, which is one right that all Indians have, regardless of caste, class, gender. We will catch you again next week for your next column and your next interview. So thank you very much. And meanwhile, folks, please keep following the Indian Express, like, share, subscribe. And please read today's pages where Yogendra Yadav ji has written his fifth column on the Bihar SIR. Until next time, thank you. Thank you very much.